I think one of the things that everybody mentions when they introduce him, and I think it is important to really understand some of the activities he's started at NSF, is that the research he's done was then also the basis for a successful internet security service company called Arbonet, which he ran and which he co-funded and ran until 2010. And so it's my real pleasure to introduce Farnam Jahanian, and he gets the mic back.
Thank you very much, Suzanne. I was wondering whether I get a chance to do a rebuttal. It's really a pleasure to be with you this afternoon, and congratulations on 50th anniversary of computer science at Purdue. What I hope to do over the next hour or so to share with you my thoughts on some extraordinary opportunities for science and engineering, but in particular for those of us who are in the area of computing, communication, and broadly speaking, information technology. I think to you folks, I don't have to convince you that advances in computing, communication, information technologies are at the center of an ongoing societal transformation, and they will be there for many decades to come. These advances underpin our economic prosperity and national security. They serve as a key driver of US competitiveness and sustainable economic growth, particularly in an increasingly global market. But equally important, these advances accelerate the pace of discovery and innovation in nearly all fields of inquiry, and I'll say more about that in a moment. And they're, of course, crucial to achieving many of our societal and national priorities. Let me give you some anecdotal sort of evidence of the impact of, broadly speaking, our community, and I'll give a bit of more precise definition on what I mean by that, but my view of it, it's a very large tent, including computer scientists, computer engineers, information school, and you see actually even a broader group of folks. But consider a couple of things. Growth of IT industry coupled with productivity gains that we have seen across the entire economy has had a tremendous impact on our discipline. There's no question that the IT industries have accounted for such a large fraction of US economic growth. For example, from 1995 to 2007, they accounted for about 25% of our economic growth. The use and production of IT accounted for 2/3 of post-1995 growth in labor productivity. As many of you know, including the students that are in this room, IT sector is the job generator, if you will. IT jobs have grown faster than almost any other discipline between 2001 and 2011. I think we all recognize this breathtaking pace of advances has brought computing, communication, information technology into the forefront of science, medicine, commerce, transportation, arts and entertainment in ways that we could not have even imagined it 15 years ago. These advances are transforming the way we live, the way we work, the way we learn, the way we communicate, the way we entertain ourselves and play. And of course, all of that means is that we're at the center of this ongoing societal transformation. Even for states, as Suzanne mentioned, I have an appointment as a faculty member at the University of Michigan. As a Midwest school, when we look at manufacturing, you see that the future of manufacturing, in fact, is tied to diversification of regional economies that are directly connected to advances that we see in cyber, in particular in computing, communication, and information technologies. So that's undeniable. But let me share with you another anecdotal thing. And I stole this slide from Ed Lazaska from University of Washington, a colleague. About a year or two ago, Wharton School at UPenn did a study of the top innovations over the last 30 years. And innovations, broadly speaking, not just in our discipline. I'm just curious what you think are the top innovations of last 30 years. The folks in the audience, don't be bashful. Thank you for saying this. I think Vint Cerf is going to be here if he's not here already. He would be disappointed if this wasn't the first one. All right. Others? Cell phones. Thank you. Anything else? PC. Thank you. So in fact, if you look at this list of top 30, and I don't know if you can see this from a distance, look at the list. You see the internet, broadband, PC and laptop, as I was mentioned, mobile phones. You had the top 3 nailed. Email, DNA testing and sequencing, MRI, microprocessor, fiber optics, office software. No comment. Laser, robotic surgery, and so on. In fact, if you look at this, there's no question. The ones that you see red bullet next to are things that our community can absolutely take credit for. We have been the driver behind these innovations, including social networking, media file compression, e-commerce, and so on and so on. And there are a number of other ones that, on that list that you can see that we have contributed significantly to the innovations in these fields. And if you look at just the last 10 years, think search, think scalability, data centers, think digital media, think mobility, e-commerce, the cloud computing, social networking, and crowdsourcing, and so on. So it's undeniable when you think about the impact of our community over the last several decades. Now, think for a moment for some of the technology push we have seen, the advances that we have seen in technology. Now, I'm not going to take you through, I know this is your 50th anniversary, but I'm not going to take you back for 50 years and go through all the technology advances. But think about, for example, advances in technology over the last 50 years have been staggering. From transistor count to memory and storage density to reduction of watts and MIPS and so on. Anecdotally, just over the last 20 years, from 1992 to 2012, the number of internet hosts and the number of transistors on a die have increased by more than 2,000 times. Again, staggering progress that we have seen. But I think that actually still tells only part of the story. There's no question these advances in technology have been transformative. But I think this quote from a recent PCAST study, and as we probably know, PCAST stands for the President's Council of Advisors in Science and Technology, and they periodically do a review of the NIDERT program, or the Networking and Information Technology Research and Development Program, across essentially various agencies. And what they said is that they make a very compelling case for networking and information technology as a national imperative. And I quote, "Recent technological and societal trends place the further advancement and application of networking and information technology squarely at the center of nations' ability to achieve essentially all of our priorities, to address essentially all of our challenges." That includes, when you think about it, the impact of our community from broadband and universal connectivity to environment and sustainability to emergency response and disaster resiliency, from healthcare and well-being to manufacturing, robotics, cybersecurity, of course, transportation and energy, and of course, education and workforce development. You see the impact of our community, the CISE community, in addressing many of these national priorities, and I'm going to come back to this issue in a moment. I promise that this talk isn't going to be an overview of CISE and all of its programs, but I am tempted, given that you've given me the stage, to share with you a few thoughts about CISE, the CISE Directorate, Computer Information Science and Engineering Directorate, today at the National Science Foundation. As Suzanne already mentioned, there are 4 directorates. I'm thrilled that Suzanne Hambrush, a member of your faculty, has been leading our CCF division. And of course, there's the Advanced Cyber Infrastructure Division, which used to be Office of Cyber Infrastructure, that has been brought into CISE, and it serves a very, very integrative role as a fabric that connects many, many disciplines. Computer and Network Systems Division, and I spoke to a number of faculty members here who actually interact with the CNS Division. Of course, our People Division, the Information and Intelligence Systems Division, these divisions are led by Alan Biltecki, Suzanne, Keith Marzullo, and Howard Walkler. And at this point, I want to digress for a second and personally thank Suzanne for her service to our country, to the science and engineering community. You have no idea what a tremendous responsibility is to run these divisions. She said my budget is about $850 million. What she really didn't say is I don't actually control any money. It all sits in the divisions. And if she's told you otherwise, you need to ask her again. She has done a phenomenal job of running the CCF division, which has a very, very broad portfolio from hardware, software, communication, and of course, theoretical computer science. And for that, please join me in thanking her. I was going to embarrass you, Suzanne. It's a tremendous service to our country. But the thing that I want to tell you about these divisions is that while we have the core areas, and I know you're familiar with these core areas, is that increasingly what you see is that the research in computer science, broadly speaking computer science, is very fluid. It's not siloed around our divisions. It cuts across many of our divisions. And we estimate, actually, about 35% of our portfolio and our funding in our various divisions, it actually cuts across divisions, cuts across the foundation involving other disciplines, and I'll come back to that, as well as involving other agencies. So increasingly what we're seeing that computer science, not only we're addressing all the core areas, has this integrative role, serves as this fabric that connects all other disciplines, all other science and engineering disciplines. And that's why you see that the silos really are non-existent when you look at the CISE Directorate, and for which I'm not only grateful, I think that's one of the unique things about the CISE Directorate at the National Science Foundation. Now, but who is the CISE community? And I said I will come back to you and give you a little bit more insight. Here's what's fascinating. A year ago or so, and I asked our folks to essentially do a very simple, analysis of the PIs and co-PIs of the awards in 2011, and just identify their primary department. That's it, their primary affiliation. And it even surprised me. Now, this includes all 4 divisions. We updated it to include the cyber infrastructure division. But actually, even the 3 divisions before a cyber infrastructure division was brought in, the numbers are roughly the same, just a couple of percentage point differences. But here's what's interesting. 61% of our PIs are exactly from the departments that you would expect. Computer science, information science, computer engineering, RI schools, and so on. But about 11% of them are from other engineering departments outside ECE. They're in mechanical engineering, they're aerospace engineering, they're in biomedical engineering, and so on. And what's even more compelling is about 25% of our PIs are from other sciences and humanities, from psychology, from mathematics, from physics, and so on. This partially reflects, I think, the future of our discipline, that many of our societal challenges that I showed you, the societal and national priorities, from healthcare to, to energy, to sustainability, these challenges are going to be addressed through interdisciplinary teams. But equally important, many of the advances are going to happen at the cross-section, at the intersection of various disciplines. And folks, what's great for our community is that we're in the middle of all of this. What's amazing, sitting where I sit at NSF, and I know a number of you that interact nationally on various research activities see this, that what's remarkable about our community is that we're in the middle of a lot of conversations involving other disciplines, addressing many of our societal priorities and challenges. Here's a snapshot of the CISE Directorate. So as Suzanne mentioned, our research budget is about over $850 million. We handled 7,600 proposals last year. I'll let you think about that for a second. So next time you have a program officer from NSF calls, asks you to be on a panel and read 12 proposals, please say yes. It's a staggering number. And part of it has to do with the fact that we have launched a number of very successful programs over the last few years. And you'll see that has led to a significant increase in the number of proposals that we're seeing, but almost 8,000 proposals this year in 2013 that we're going to deal with. We had 1,700 awards. Success rate, take it with a grain of salt, because many of these exciting new programs have a much, much lower success rate, as you know. We held 316 panels last year across the 4 divisions. And what I'm quite proud of is the number of people that we supported, including 84 senior researchers, such as a number of you in this room. But the number that's quite impressive is 6,100 graduate students and 2,500 undergraduates were supported through various CISE programs over the last year, especially the 6,000 graduate students. As you can know, our discipline is heavily biased towards supporting graduate students, and this data definitely backs that up. So enough about CISE. What I hope to do in the remaining 40 minutes or so that I have, to share with you and give you some insight about frontiers of research in, again, broadly speaking, computing, communication, and information technologies, and how it's influencing our priorities, how it's influencing our investment priorities, and also how it's influencing formulation of new programs over the next few years. So think of these as major trends that we see that are shaping our discipline. These are societal trends, and these are technological trends. And of course, what I want to say is that broad, sustained support for foundational core research catalyzes these frontiers. And you'll see a number of examples of that in a moment. So let me start with one that I know is close. I, in fact, just had a terrific conversation with a number of junior and mid-career faculty, and the issue of data came up several times. And we have Fran Berman in the audience, and I know that's close to her heart as well. So let me actually start with data. We've seen an explosive growth in size, complexity, and rate of digital data that's produced by modern experimental methods, observational methods, large-scale simulation, scientific instruments such as telescope, particle accelerator, internet transactions, email, video images, click streams, not to mention ubiquitous, widespread deployment of sensors everywhere. And data, in fact, represents a transformative new currency for science, engineering, education, and commerce. We are actually in a period where it's been called the era of data or information. Actually, the truth is that we're drowning in data tsunami. And this notion of big data, if you will, is not characterized not only by the enormous volume or the velocity of its generation, but also by the heterogeneity, by diversity, as well as complexity of the data. As I mentioned, there are numerous ways this data is actually getting generated. What's exciting is that there are enormous opportunities to harness these large-scale, diverse data sets, to extract knowledge from them, and to provide powerful new approaches to drive discovery and decision-making. And equally excited is to make increasingly accurate prediction based on the data. Again, what's possible is new insight into science, spotting business trends, preventing diseases, managing our precious resources, and so on. So what does this really mean for scientific discovery? Data-driven discovery is actually revolutionizing scientific exploration and engineering innovation. We're in the middle of a paradigm shift from hypothesis-driven, if you will, to data-driven discovery. And it's having a profound impact on the culture and the conduct of scientific research. Consider, for example, from new insight about protein structure, biomedical research, clinical decision-making, and climate modeling, to new ways to mitigate and respond to natural disasters and develop new strategies for effective learning and education. There are truly enormous opportunities, and of course, I don't want to discount the fact that we have to be able to do this without sacrificing privacy, intellectual property, individual rights, and so on and so on. But let me switch actually to a related topic having to do with education. We also need people with skills to analyze, understand, and make decisions based on large, diverse, and complex data sets. A recent report by McKinsey & Company actually said that by 2018, the United States alone faces a shortage of about 140,000 to 190,000 people with analytical skills, and 1.5 million managers and analysts with skills to understand and make decisions based on analysis of big data. I believe that you see this on your campus today, from the demand that you see for various courses that you teach in data mining and machine learning and so on. And that's actually, I think it's just the tip of the iceberg. We're going to see a huge, huge demand. And it's not just turning everybody to become computer scientists or statisticians, far from it. These are scientists and engineers and essentially managers people who will need essentially analytical skills and skills to essentially manage data. And of course, cyber infrastructure is about people, enabling them to do what they have not been able to do. So there is a relationship between the education and workforce development and investment that we make in cyber infrastructure. As you probably know, last year, there was a federal initiative launched called Big Data Research and Development. Happy to tell you that this came out of a cross-agency Big Data Senior Steering Group that was chartered in 2011 by the White House, and it was led by National Science Foundation and NIH. This announcement included a number of agencies, including NSF, NIH, USGS, DoD, DARPA, DOE. It's truly a cross-agency initiative involving many of the agencies, goes beyond the main agencies that I mentioned. At the core of this is a new program called Big Data, which is a joint program of National Science Foundation and NIH. And you've seen the research threads from collection, storage management, data analytics, research and data sharing collaboration. But when it comes to our thinking about moving forward, it's not about just foundational research to develop new techniques and technologies. It's also about new cyber infrastructure to manage, curate, and serve data to research community. It's about new approaches to education and workforce development. And it's also about community building, essentially creating interdisciplinary group of researchers that collaborate on data. And this is going to be at the center of essentially our investment in data. But of course, there are significant policy ramifications. And before I get to that, actually, and these are complex policy settings. They have to do with the fact that researchers want data. Public policy requires access to data. Public policy also requires protection of privacy, intellectual property, and sensitive information. And policy implementation for data sharing and open access are needed. Many of you may have actually seen a recent memo from the White House on 22nd of February that directed federal agencies to develop a plan to support increased public access of results from federally funded research. This includes, by the way, peer-reviewed publications as well as digitally formatted scientific data. What I want to leave you with related to this public policy issue is that we recognize as we develop this plan, this implementation plan for public policy could vary by disciplines. New business models for universities, libraries, publishers, and scholarly and professional societies could emerge as a result of that. Back to our portfolio and data, the kind of research that gets funded, including, for example, new tools for extracting knowledge from large data sets, or new, essentially, models for forecasting tornadoes. I have a couple of videos, and this one we might actually have time to show because this overlaps between our high-performance computing investment and also analysis of large data. So let me entertain you.
The National Weather Service has issued a tornado.
It was a stormy and deadly spring day across the Deep South. Computer scientist Amy McGovern is working with meteorologists to better model tornado formation.
And that confirms that there was a tornado there.
They don't just study real storms, they create supercomputer simulations to analyze how constantly changing storm components interact.
The problem is that if you need to understand the atmosphere, there are a whole lot of other variables out there. There's pressure, there's temperature, and none of the radars or none of the current sensing instruments can get that at the resolution that we really need to fundamentally understand the tornadoes.
With support from the National Science Foundation, McGovern combs through vast amounts of weather data, looking for patterns that might be harbingers of a twister in the making.
What we're doing with our simulations is actually being able to sense all of these fundamental variables every 50 meters.
The goal? Instead of tornado warnings based on radar or a visual sighting, someday highly precise alerts could be issued based on a numerical forecast model.
It's a game changer, complete game changer. So radar leaves off basically with detecting something that's already present. The numerical model gives us the opportunity to actually project it and predict it far in advance. If it works, it will give us the promise of actually predicting a tornado maybe 1 to 2 hours in advance.
Hours of precious time that could save lives. I'm Lori Howell.
So it's not just about developing models and doing analysis. It's also about predicting. Now let me move on to the next topic. And the next emerging frontiers, we refer to it as the melding of, if you will, cyber and the physical world. And it's enabling all sorts of smart systems around us. This is, of course, enabled partially by widespread deployment of low-power sensors, from tiny specialized communication processors such as smart dust to specialized sensors that we wear in our bodies, in our bridges, various kinds of infrastructure, power grids, and so on. In fact, these mobile phone devices are amazing sensors these days, from geolocation to vibration and so on. And it's enabling a range of applications, from environmental information to physical infrastructure information to emergency response to social and health informatics. And the truth here is that we can do much more than just monitor and observe. We can also combine disparate sources of information, and this is how it relates to the notion of data that we talked about, to create a deeper form of reasoning, if you will. And we can make decisions, control or react, if you will, and we can instrument, observe, analyze, and equally important, respond. In terms of our thinking and in terms of how NSF's portfolio is shaped by this, there are two major programs at NSF that focus in this. And both of these involve multiple agencies. The first one is the Cyber Physical Systems Program, whose goal is to deeply integrate computation, communication, and control into physical systems, and the foundational, essentially, research that goes into enabling that. Has a broad, essentially, range of applications, from transportation to energy and industrial automation, health and medical care, critical infrastructure, as I mentioned. And the idea here is to enable dependable operation with high assurance and reliability, with all the requirements having to do with safety, security, usability, and so on. And there are many aspects of it in terms of pervasive computation, sensing and control, networking and multi and extreme scales, dynamically recognizing and reorganizing systems, high degrees of automation, and so on. It's an exciting area of research that we've been funding for the past 5 years or so. Since 2009, about $140 million has been invested in this area. There are 350 PIs and co-PIs from 35 states, which I know for a fact does include Indiana and Purdue University, have been funded through this program. And in 2012, we've made about 45 new awards with $30 million investments. This is a partnership between the CISE Directorate and Engineering Directorate. You'll see that there are a number of activities that are across foundation where CISE and engineering are teaming up to lead that. And I think that that's a very healthy development. One of the other programs that I wanted to highlight is the National Robotic Initiative, whose goal is to develop the next generation of collaborative robots or co-robots that work with CISE and cooperatively with people. It's a nationally coordinated cross-agency effort involving NSF, NASA, USDA, and NIH. NSF was the lead agency, similar to the Big Data Initiative. And the goal of this is to understand the long-term, the goal of it also includes, I should say, to understand the long-term social, behavioral, and economic ramification or implications of robots or co-robots. And again, there are many, many applications associated with this. In terms of this program, you probably saw the announcement. This was actually announced. The program was announced by President Obama at an event in June of 2011. As I mentioned, it's a nationally coordinated program across multiple government agencies to develop the next generation of robotics, to advance the capability and usability of such systems and artifacts, and to encourage existing and new communities to focus on innovative application areas. In terms of the focus of the program, after it was launched in June of 2011, and last year was the first year of it that we went through the whole thing, we received more than 700 proposals and over $1 billion in funding requests. That's slightly larger than the entire CISE budget, by the way. Across various agencies, we invested about $50 million just in 2012. 108 PIs and co-PIs in 22 states were funded as part of this program. As the saying goes, if you build it, they will come. And this is sort of representative of the various states and various researchers that were funded as part of this program. There's a moral to the story as far as this program is concerned that I want to share with you. I mentioned that this is a program that involves NSF, NIH, NASA, and USDA. And what's exciting about it is that this is not a program that each of these agencies developed their own solicitation and just funded things separately. There's a single solicitation that we put together involving these agencies. Now you wonder, why does that matter? Well, What it really does is allows us to coordinate the priorities and interests of various agencies. And for you, the research community, it really grows the pie. It has grown the pie beyond NSF's investment in this. Sure, NSF led it, but NIH, USDA, and as well as NASA are a real player. About a year later, after we launched the program, when we went through the first round, we had an event at the Robotics Caucus on the Hill. And the Robotics Caucus includes 35 congressmen from across the country. And we briefed them with representatives from these various agencies. What was most compelling is that we ended up getting proposals from groups of researchers who would have never collaborated had it not been NSF and NIH, for example, teaming up, or NSF and NASA teaming up. So what we really ended up doing is not only growing the pie or resources for the community, but we actually enabled researchers to come together because they saw NSF and NIH teaming up on a solicitation. We went with NSF's merit review process. NIH and NASA and other agencies added their own additional processes at the end of it. But at the end, these agencies got together. After all the NSF panels were done, we sat around and we talked about what agency was going to fund what. And I think that's an exciting model for many of these cross-agency activities that I hope we'll be able to replicate moving forward. If you remember, I mentioned Big Data Initiative is also a joint initiative of NSF and NIH, and that's exactly how we are modeling it. In the interest of time, let me just highlight three exciting, essentially, applications that fall under these broad areas, as we call it, the smart systems. For example, assistive medical technologies, programmable second skin that senses and re-educates injured nervous systems. A towel-folding robot, which is based on development of novel computer vision and algorithms enabling robots to manipulate flexible objects that change shape. Or autonomous vehicles, which has lots of interesting research from development of precision and real-time sensors, smart algorithms, verification tools, enabling self-driving cars. That's another project. These are sampling of essentially activities from this range of investments that we've done. The next area that I want to highlight has to do with expanding the limits of computation. After decades of exponential growth that we have seen, in processor performance, commonly referred to as Moore's Law, single processor performance has stalled around mid-2004, partially because of physical limitation of heat density in CMOS devices. You know, we can pack more transistors, there's no question about that. But in a nutshell, the problem is that single processor performance has plateaued because of clock speed frequency has not kept up due to partially to power density problems. And many of you are experts on this subject. So you may wonder, great, we benefited from Moore's Law for the past 30, 40 years. It's been great. Well, it's plateauing processor performance. So what? Well, let me convince you that this really has some important ramifications. Think of the impact of single processor performance. Hello, sir. My pleasure to introduce Vint Cerf. So why does this matter? Think of single processor performance. This has had a significant impact on a broad range of things. Consider, for example, the benefit to the science community that's accentuated by massive data sets that we've seen. Scientists have shown an increasing appetite and need for speed and performance. Important new science in physics, biology, material science, health and medicine, climate change require increasing power. It's not about just answering questions faster. It's also about answering questions that we could not answer before. The impact on the intelligence community for support for national defense and national intelligence will need increasing, essentially, processing power. Applications range from training simulation, autonomous robotics vehicle, airport security, surveillance, video analytics, infrastructure defense against cyber attacks, data analytics for intelligence, and so on. And of course, when you talk to the private sector, impact on consumer and enterprise needs are increasing, from applications such as search and data mining, real-time decision-making, web services, digital content creation, and so on, speech recognition, and so on and so on. So the impact is not only for science and engineering, it's not only for national defense and intelligence, but it also has direct ramifications for the private sector. So the question is, can we continue the exponential growth that we've seen in computational power in the coming decade, and what do we do about that? So there are obviously long-term investments that we make, physics, electrical engineering, computer science, for new materials, non-charge transfer devices. Whether the answer is going to be in bio, nano, or quantum devices, we have no idea. But we know that over the next 10, 20, 30 years, hopefully we'll have an answer to that, and we hopefully will have a replacement for CMOS. What's happening in the short term, of course, architectural innovation with multi-core and many-core, domain-specific integrated circuits. The question is, what are we doing in the intermediate term? While we maintain our long-term investment, we need to be able to exploit broadly available concurrency and parallelism, new algorithmic innovations, and so on. And that led to a new program that we launched. Actually, Suzanne Hambrush's area was instrumental for launching this program called Exploiting Parallelism and Scalability. And the idea here is to support groundbreaking research that will lead to new area of parallel computing. Of course, as some of the other activities that I talked about, it's beyond the scope of the discussion, but the focus is on foundational principle, cross-layer approaches, scalable and distributed architectures, and of course, domain-specific design. We're very excited about this program, and this is, again, a program that I would refer to as an intermediate-term program, trying to essentially new collaboration, combining expertise, cutting across abstraction, software, hardware layer, and so on. New models, new programming models, new ways of thinking about parallelism. This, of course, complements our existing investments in advanced computational infrastructure, in computational resources at all scales, from campus, regional, national, and international. That's done by our new division, Advanced Cyber Infrastructure Division. And many of you have seen the announcement last week of Blue Water supercomputer at the University of Illinois, which was dedicated last week. And of course, new facilities at University of Texas at Austin, the Stampede facility, which was also dedicated both last week. And that kind of investment, of course, is going to continue. Let me move on in the interest of time to a fourth area of emerging frontiers. As I'm sure many of you agree, our nation's critical infrastructure, and more importantly, the internet, play a vital role in tightly integrating the economic, political, and social fabric of our society. These interdependencies, of course, leave the nation vulnerable to a wide range of threats that challenge the security, availability, reliability, and overall trustworthiness of our information infrastructure. Overcoming these vulnerabilities, of course, is a national priority and continues to be an important part of our thinking and our portfolio. What are some of the challenges? Of course, attackers and defenses are co-evolving. A system that was secure yesterday may no longer be secure tomorrow. The technology base for these systems is frequently updated. New systems introduce new vulnerabilities. The environment in which we deploy our computing systems are changing. Their functionality is changing. Just think about it. Cloud computing and mobile platform have introduced obviously new functionalities, exciting new opportunities, but at the same time, they're also introducing some interesting and new challenges. When you talk to the folks in the private sector and the government, one of the biggest challenges to the deployment of cloud computing has to do with reliability and integrity and, of course, security issues. But probably one of the most important points here is that as automation pervades new platforms, vulnerabilities can be found in our critical infrastructure, from automotive systems to power grids to medical devices and so on. And that is going to become an important challenge for us to address. And of course, sophistication, number, specificity of the targets and so on is evolving, and we're seeing an increase in sophistication and targeted nature of the attack. But one of the important observations that actually a number of you, including Gene, has made in the past is that cybersecurity is a multi-dimensional problem. It's not just a computer science problem. It's not a technology problem. It does require essentially expertise from a broad range of essentially disciplines, from mathematics to economics, behavioral, and social sciences. So in launching our newly essentially revamped cybersecurity program, Secure and Trustworthy Cyberspace, of course, the goal of it is to support fundamental scientific advances and technologies to protect our cyber systems. That's a given. But there are three points that I want to make about this. One is that for the first time, we made the cybersecurity activities at NSF, that's funded by NSF, to become truly a cross-directorate activity. Not only the focus is on the technology, on trustworthy computing, but we brought in our social, behavioral, economic sciences colleagues into the picture. And also there's a focus on transition to practice. So it's not a surprise that certainly over the last 2 years, not only its CISE that's been investing in cybersecurity for more than a decade, but also we have the engineering directorate because of their interest in critical infrastructure and security of our critical infrastructure. We have math, of course, their interest in cryptography, ACI for transition to practice, and also SBE, the Social Behavioral Economics Directorate, is involved because of all the usability issues, because of all the new economic models, the new incentive models that have to be explored as a research problem. And finally, what we have done is, this year also, I'm happy to tell you that Education Directorate teamed up with us because of the workforce development issues having to do with cybersecurity. We also launched the Frontiers in Cybersecurity, which are center-scale activities focusing essentially on cybersecurity issues. So I know this is an area that a number of you are engaged in, and I'm not going to spend much more time on it, except to tell you that our commitment to this area grows. And to be very candid, we receive broad support from the Hill for our investment in the cybersecurity area. And obviously, this is an important national priority. As I get closer to the end of my talk, let me highlight two other areas of emerging frontiers that I want to share with you. One has to do with the fact that, again, we're seeing explosive growth in volume and traffic diversity. And there are a number of examples that I can give you, from voice over IP, from video, from Twitter, from the broadband penetration, and so on. But this slide that I borrowed from Intel probably captures it all. What happens in an internet minute? And it's actually very fortuitous to have Vint Cerf sitting in the audience. And I posed the question, what happens in an internet minute? It is a great answer, Vint. A couple of things. Consider this. Today, the number of devices we have equals the population of Earth. In less than 3 years, that's going to be double the population of Earth. That's a staggering number. In 2015, it would take 5 years to view all videos crossing IP network each second. There are 47,000 application downloads. There are 204 email messages sent every second. There are 3,000 photo uploads, 100,000 new tweets. I think my teenage kids actually are responsible for a significant fraction of that, but we won't go there. And 61,000 hours of music. These are staggering numbers. The opportunities and the challenges are just enormous. One thing that actually makes this problem even more fascinating has to do with the pervasive nature of cellular networks and mobile devices. It turns out there are about 5.5 billion mobile phone subscribers. 85% of new handsets will be available to access mobile web. 1 in 5 has access to fast services, and that's growing rapidly. But consider this for a moment. This is the only digital system accessible to the majority of our planet. And there's a growing ecosystem of tools and applications that impact banking, commerce, healthcare, social networking, 600,000 distinct active apps in just App Store and growing. And of course, mobile browsers can now display much of the content that's available to our desktops. There are lots of issues having to do with sensitivity, privacy issues, and also consider one other fact, that mobile systems are now common in developing worlds where you don't have credit cards. They have skipped over the credit card systems, and online payment transactions are being made through mobile devices. Again, from scalability of the infrastructure to spectrum management, security, privacy, energy consumption, leveraging and advancing new networking technologies are many of the issues that we have to address. That brings me to my last area of emerging frontiers. I would like to call this augmenting human capabilities, but let me take you down a path for a moment. Computing technologies, there's no question that we live in a network society. We are more connected to others than any other time in our human history. And computing technologies in human societies are co-evolving, transforming each other in the process, and access to technology and information is enhancing our capabilities and physical capabilities and cognitive capabilities. These are, of course, being accelerated through many advances, from social informatics, assistive technologies, augmented reality. We talked about robotics already, vision and perception, natural language understanding, and so on and so on. Many of these areas you're doing active research in. Let me share with you one example. Consider, for example, social networks solving complex problems, where networks of human minds are taking citizen science to a brand new level. In 2011, thousands of players of Foldit, which is a multiplayer game, I'm sure a number of you have probably played this game, helped to decipher the 3D structure of an enzyme involved in the reproduction of HIV in just 10 days. What's remarkable is that the problem how to configure this structure had stopped scientists for more than 50 years. So this is not just throwing a bunch of monkeys at a problem. I promise you that. Thank you for getting that pun. A lot of people don't. This is just the beginning of a new field of collective intelligence in which modern technology yields new understanding of collective human behavior and new methods for problem solving. We're just scratching the surface, no doubt. And from that, what we see is enormous opportunities where you have converging technologies for enhancing performance and quality of life. We see a synergistic combination of emerging technologies from information, from cognition, nanotechnology, materials that will improve the quality and quantity of our labor and thoughts. It will sustain and enhance our function and quality of life that may be diminished by age or injury. It will improve personal performance with augmented cognition and strength. This is an enormous opportunity for advances in computing, information, and all these areas that I talked about. This is truly an interdisciplinary exploration. I want to wrap up by highlighting a couple of things. As I mentioned at the beginning of the talk, these advances, of course, are driven partially to address many of our national priorities, from emergency response to environment and sustainability, healthcare, cybersecurity, transportation, and energy. But the one that I want to highlight has to do with education and workforce development. Two very quick notes. The computing community faces three significant interrelated challenges in workforce development. We have underproduction of degrees, which is getting better, but we also have underrepresentation, which is undeniable in our discipline. And there's a lot of data to back it up. And then there's a lack of presence in K through 12. Folks, the simple message here is we'll never solve the underproduction problem if we don't solve the underrepresentation problem. Just the math doesn't work. And we can't solve the underrepresentation problem if you don't solve the issues in our K through 12. So what I want to leave you with respect to this issue in education is we are taking some serious steps toward addressing the education and workforce development by attacking the problem at the high school level. And there's more to be said about that, especially around our CS10K program, which I invite you to look at. The other issue related to education has to do with cyber learning. MOOCs, of course, are taking over. Everyone is really excited about it. And I don't dispute the fact that this is potentially transformative. But what I want to step back and mention to you is that we've had a program at NSF called Cyber Learning. We're going to grow investment in this. And the idea here is we want to improve learning by integrating emerging technologies with knowledge from research about how people learn. There's no doubt that MOOCs and online technologies have the potential to democratize education. Richer collaboration and opportunities for sharing, opportunities for richer learning. When you talk to our colleagues in education departments, what they get excited about is really the transformative impact of technology on assessment and evaluation. Access to data is potentially revolutionizing their approach to research. So the idea here isn't just to develop technologies and get 200,000 people to sign up for a course that we put online. People are going to do this. We're glad they're going to do this. That's awesome. What we need to do is we need to figure out the impact of technology on learning. We need to do research in learning. And that research cannot be done unless you bring computer scientists, people on the technology side, with people in social behavioral economics, and people in education together to do research. And this is going to be an area of focus that we're going to, as I mentioned to you, there are a number of cross-agency and cross-directorate activities. This is one that involves the CISE Directorate, the Engineering Directorate, our Social Behavioral Economics Directorate, as well as our Education Directorate. I'm toward the end of my talk, so I want to jump to looking forward. We are entering a new era of science and engineering. And this area is anchored partially by the new era of observation and also by the new era of data of information, as I mentioned. This categorization cuts across every field of science and engineering, including social science and humanities. At one extreme in this new era of observation, what we have is large-scale experimental tools and infrastructures such as telescopes that have the resolution, scope, and the bandwidth to capture the outer edges of the solar system and the universe. So we're talking about a scale on the orders of billions of light years. On the other extreme, we have research that explore phenomena at nano, pico, and femtoscale. This experimental capability, combined with advances in computational hardware and software, gives us an infrastructure to develop new knowledge at a level that we could not have seen a few years ago. Add to that the sophistication of theoretical capabilities. There are, again, enormous opportunities, and new era of observation has led to unprecedented amount of data and information, as I mentioned. There are, of course, a number of challenges, and we at NSF talk about these. These global challenges need global solutions, from pandemic to man-made disaster, displaced population, and so on, including the NAE grant challenges. We're also entering an era where we're seeing a borderless knowledge enterprise. National borders essentially place no barrier to instant information access and talent recruitment. We're also seeing shifting demographics, rapidly increasing concentration of engineers and scientists in Asia that I think our nation needs to deal with. Shifting economics, science and engineering, research and education is seen as a ticket to economic prosperity to large and small developing countries. This has been at the core of our economic success for the last many decades. So moving ahead, we need to support and nurture a culture of engagement and service. We need to embrace a collaborative culture enabled by foundational research and our investment in infrastructure. And of course, we have the responsibility to educate and empower the next generation of scientists and engineers, and in this case, of course, people in information technology, computing, and broadly speaking, in communication. As I wrap up, there's no doubt that our investment in research, education, and infrastructure have returned exceptional dividends to our nation. A basic research community is the foundation of long-term discovery and innovation. As I mentioned at the beginning of this presentation, it's a foundation of our economic prosperity and our national security. As a field of inquiry, I hope you agree with me, computing, communication, information technology, this big tent that I talked about at the beginning of the talk, has a rich intellectual agenda, is highly creative, is highly interactive, with enormous possibilities for changing the world, and it's accelerating the pace of discovery and innovation almost in every other field of inquiry. And to keep those benefits flowing, we need to constantly replenish the wellspring of new ideas and train new talent. With that, thank you so much for your attention.